Hello and welcome to the zoo. Today we're going to talk about the Internet of Things, but not from the technical or business standpoint, but rather from how this is going to take our jobs and change it. John Hall is joining me from England. Where are you in England, by the way?
I'm back in Deal in Kent, right on the southeast corner of England. If you asked me about 15 hours ago, I was still in Houston, which wasn't the plan, but Houston weather was doing its thing at the weekend, so we were stumbled in earlier on with a 2-year-old and a very tired family. And
slightly jet lagged and delusional. You're going to present this conference, or you hope to at least. And you're taking the approach, or you want to look at the Internet of Things from how it going to affect our day-to-day jobs, and not just IT workers' jobs, people in general.
Yeah, I mean, and I tend to think of this in the context. You know, we talk a lot about the context of digital services in general and digital transformation in companies, and every company now being a technology company, and the Internet of Things is just one of the many layers that is underpinning that. If you ask Gartner, there'll be 20 billion devices in the enterprise event. I think they've upped that to 23 billion in a recent report by 2020, which isn't far off. If you ask Cisco, they say 50 billion. I mean, Cisco probably a lot of skin in the game on the networking side, so they probably want it to be 50 billion. But whatever the number, it's going to be big. But of course, these things are not just appearing spontaneously. They're part of the fundamental structures of business, and they're part of the things that we in service management need to manage. So it's definitely of interest to everybody within IT and ITSM and more broadly within the business. And
that's one thing I asked on our recent chatter group, actually, the Future Biz we mentioned, is we have this Internet of Thing, but there's no plan really for how to manage it. We can't run data centers with 1,000 servers in it without problems. Now you're going to add 50 billion items to it. How will that, from an IT perspective, change? And how are we going to cope with that?
There's going to be a couple of really dramatic changes from the IT point of view. The first is actually in the hardware. If you think, I can go, and this is the most English thing I'll say on this call, I can go to my local fish and chip shop, and they are using a little payment device. They use iZettle, which is a Swedish company, but there are many others, and they all look pretty much the same, and that's an important point. And these are just little telephone-connected payment devices. What's interesting is that this kind of technology is becoming more and more prevalent, but it's not built on the things that retail technology traditionally built on. When I used to work in a retail job when I was at university, if the till went down, if the point of sale failed, you went to a back room and you rebooted a PC.
Yeah.
Because everything was based on x86, on Windows. Most cash points are still on some, most ATMs are on some terrifyingly old version of Windows. But this stuff's built on cheap commodity smartphone components. It's the same stuff that links up in smartphones. And right now, IT organizations are geared up to supporting x86 and Windows, but not so much in terms of discovering and supporting and managing this new breed of technology.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead. I've looked at the Facebook data center up in northern part of Sweden, doing the same thing. They don't see the point in having the latest and greatest. They take what they need, they get up and running, and this is what runs large part of Facebook. So it seems to be that commoditization seems to be a driving force. Call it cloud, call it Internet of Things, technology in general.
Yeah, and you buy whatever Internet of Things stuff you buy, whether you're buying stuff for the house or whether it's this, retail is a good example, but there's lots of other examples of line of business stuff. Let's say it's pretty much commoditized hardware. So what I argue and what I'll be talking about at the Service Desk show is that actually the Internet of Things is a software revolution. It's not really a hardware revolution. That iZettle thing that the guy who runs my local chip shop has got, that you can get one that looks exactly the same from a different company, but the software is different. So they're buying standardized hardware, and what we need to be thinking about in the enterprise is actually, just like all software, it's going to have vulnerabilities, it's going to need patching, it's going to need support. We think about the Internet of Things in terms of bits of little boxes and bits of plastic and things we wear, but actually what's really going on is a lot of embedded new software, and some additional challenges. You mentioned the data center, but we see, for example, a lot of industrial. We have an oil company customer who's got thousands and thousands of miles of pipeline with lots of little monitoring devices. But those things, they're networked, but they're not networked on a great big high bandwidth backplane like everything in the data center is. I just
I know what you mean. Yeah,
I don't know networking. I just said some words. I hope I got them right.
No, that's right. I used to do networking. Sounds about right.
Good. But if you think about it, we're now going to have business services fundamentally built on these small gadgets, these small Internet of Things, and they're going to be in little clusters, and the data flow will be much smaller, much slower between a lot of these things. Yeah, as I say, they're built on maybe 3G radio and all these lower spec pipes. So even the nature of what is a data center? If you've got 5,000 devices along a pipeline and they're all communicating with each other because they're not all directly connected to a central point, then maybe that's almost a data center. We've got to think about the structures of IT, how we and how we maybe reapply our support practices that have kind of been so ground in by big computers in big data centers.
Yeah. If you then take the fish and chip stuff and expand that into the offices and to manufacturing plants or what have you, where does Internet of Things take businesses in general? How will that change? I mean, for example, I think in a short time, smart offices, so to speak, you can come in and not only do you see where people are sitting, but where the noise level is high or low, where there's a lot of foot traffic. No. Do you see that happening anytime soon? Things like that, and what type of things do you expect?
I mean, the Internet of Things is a huge commercial opportunity. I feel like I've talked about problems so far, at least challenges, but it's coming because it's so valuable. And just the other week I was listening to a podcast on the subject, and it was talking about in Californian vineyards, for example, now they can connect flow meters to each plant, which can detect the water going through the vine and water just the right amount accordingly, which in California is a hot topic, I know. Yeah. So that's an example of truly commercially powerful use of technology, of these small pieces of technology. So you can apply that to the office space. You can apply that to the data center, to the line of business in retail, in healthcare. It's very big in healthcare, this kind of transformation. And what's driving it is not the fact that it's just a nifty idea. It's genuinely worth billions and billions and billions of dollars in improved productivity, improved profitability. Yeah. And so that alone, regardless of all the challenges, it's going to shove it into the business whether IT likes it or not.
Yeah. Well, it's happening in more interesting places than offices. There was someone who explained to me that in Japan, they measure how many steps each cow takes, at least one part. And based on the number of steps, they changed the food ration for herds. And I thought, okay, so they didn't do that before. So it opens up, it finds problem we didn't realize we had, or it creates efficiency we didn't realize we could achieve. I wonder how that's going to work with humans. Do you think we can use Internet of Things to become more productive as knowledge workers?
It's an interesting challenge, isn't it? I mean, we're always told about, technology is going to make us hugely more productive. Usually it kind of seems to make us work harder, but that's getting a bit fundamental, isn't it? I think that, as I say, there are so many, it can bring new aspects of technology in much lighter weight, low cost form to whatever challenge you care to identify. We've just picked out two from the agricultural sector, but medical care is a really obvious one. You can monitor people's health right there on their body, transmit back to data centers, process that information, and so it becomes a platform for innovation. And again, because it's quite cheap commodity components that largely drive the Internet of Things, there's not a huge barrier to entry, at least at the hardware level. So then it's just another realm in which software is, to use the cliche, software is eating the world. Software companies can innovate great new ideas, great new ways of getting more productive, and build it in a very, very easy commoditized hardware platform, which is, again, it brings huge opportunity, but also some some challenges. It's a bit of a wild west out there in terms of standards and commercial practices. We recently saw a very high profile electric lock manufacturer who are a very big name in that sector, and they've of course moved into connected locks and connected devices because that's what people need to do. And recently it was found that 2 of their major products were backdoored, there was a really serious vulnerability. So suddenly every single one of these locks, and they're used in high security areas like airports and hospitals, every single one of these locks is vulnerable until somebody gets out there and patches the firmware.
Mm-hmm.
Which kind of brings us around to, I was just talking last week to an IT asset management conference. Suddenly someone's going to ask, where have we put all these things? Facilities bought them. They deployed, the security team maybe bought them, facilities deployed them. IT didn't even know about them until they appeared on the network. But suddenly IT is taking the calls.
Yeah.
And we've got to do.
But IT can barely keep up with their own assets. I mean, if you audit the average company, if you hit an 80% accuracy, that's success, right? Let's be honest. And then with billions of issues, items coming on, it's going to be interesting. Wanted to ask you, if you look at DevOps, and some companies call it the application economy and so on, is DevOps then becoming more important? I mean, it's already having a critical role, but with Internet of Things, as you talk about, we move from a hardware world to a software world. Does the DevOps become more important, and does Agile and all that stuff really become more than just something that some tech geeks working on? And me as a business manager, I need to have a finger in DevOps because I constantly need new software, if you will, to do new functions with this Internet of Things.
Again, this is a very powerful and very real movement for very good reasons in many cases. And of course, if you regard the Internet of Things as another innovation platform, then people are going to want to be as agile and rapid to market, rapid to update as their user story could need. We also see a lot of devices in which the software is in the custody of the third-party vendor. And again, that means that some vendors are going to be in that mindset of, that DevOps mindset. They want to push out updates rapidly, push out, in fact, you probably want to be with one of those vendors in case that vulnerability comes along or that opportunity comes along. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, though. We recently saw a company called Revolve, which was it's a domestic product, really, a home automation product that was acquired by Nest, who in turn had become a Google company. And because that software is under the control of the vendor, and because Revolve had stopped being developed, they've actually recently switched all the devices off. If it doesn't, you could have bought that device 3 years ago, used it happily for 3 years, and then it's not even that you don't get updates anymore. It just stops. They are no longer operating those devices. Your device is basically a brick. And that again needs, if that starts happening in the enterprise, that could start getting interesting.
Yeah, hopefully you get some kind of end of life notification before that happens. Look at your job today. You are a product manager. You work with teams around the globe. You travel a lot. You do certain things that are very traditional in the workforce. Regardless of timeline, when the Internet of Things really started kicking, how do you think your day will change? Is there anything that's different? Will email disappear? Will you be able to have your children summoned by an Uber-like service from kindergarten around, rather than you have to leave the office and go get it, which is the highlight of the day? But still, will our lives, will our jobs substantially change?
Wouldn't it be lovely if email could disappear? Yeah, of course, in my line, I'm sort of thinking about what we do with our products as much as anything. But if you think about kind of the day-to-day, the day-to-day life of, I don't know, shop floor, whatever I am, middle manager, I don't know what you call it. I think people have already really incorporated a lot of connected devices into their own life, and even in terms of the getting to the office and back. A lot of people's cars are highly connected now. Mine's not. Mine's old enough that you still hit it with a hammer when it breaks and it starts working again, hopefully after enough hits. But we see every day, you think there's been a huge, the fitness devices market has got very big. People's cars are well connected. People are interacting with services, via things like their mobile phones, which you could argue is an Internet of Things device. It's a small, portable, connected device which does all sorts of interesting software stuff. So in terms of my job, I don't know, but I think probably those of us who work in offices every day, or any kind of commercial building, are definitely going to see changes. You described things like climate control, but I think even just when you think about the little bits of friction in a working day, I can see that being the kind of place where people are going to apply solutions. If you've got to hunt for your badge in your bag before you can get through the door of the building, if you and that's only after you spend 10 minutes finding a parking space, and then you get into the building and there's a queue at the coffee machine. All these things are things that connecting up some of those devices, connecting up some of those areas of infrastructure could make a difference. And that's just the first, as you walk through the door in the morning. So I because the hardware is cheap, and because there's so much hunger for developing innovative software to solve problems, I can see there being fundamental changes in a lot of things. And of course, some of them will be genuinely valuable. Some of them will be fluff that will probably not last.
Oh, so you mean my idea that the robot will come to you with a hot cup of tea because your blood sugar is low, which it reads from your Fitbit, that is not productive? That's
extremely productive. But even just the being poured as you walk through the door in the morning in the office, wouldn't that be nice?
You could each have one robot assigned to it.
This is the jet lag talking now, wouldn't that be nice?
Well, just think about travel. I mean, the Internet of Things that we get, the top. Hey, on a plane, if you're lucky, you get Wi-Fi. Okay, that's where we are today. There's so much we can do, and especially as business travel, there's one thing in vacation I like to just read a paperback. But when I'm on a 6-hour flight and I, there's only so much work I can do. I really hope that can be improved, because we spend an awful lot of time in the air or various transportation, trains, for example. Where more can be done and where more information could be fed to us. You travel a lot. What would you like to see more than anything else?
I do. I mean, I saw the simplest example in Reading, where I lived until fairly recently, which is a reasonably sort of tech-aware town. And just the simplest little thing, they have a good bus system, and as you're getting on the bus, as you get near the train station, something talks to something, and there's a screen on the bus that usually just broadcasts commercial adverts, and suddenly it's got the next 10 or so departures from Reading Station. So at that point, I immediately know if I've got to run or if I got time for a coffee, and just simple little things like that, connecting up points of information, probably a couple of APIs involved. Someone just thought of something that was a really neat idea.
Yeah,
that has real value, and so absolutely. I mean, it's one of those areas where the sky's the limit in terms of what could be innovated on this. And as I say, especially because it's not about trickery with soldering irons; it's just about trickery with lines of embedded code. There's going to be plenty of opportunity for this to change our day.
Well, like I said, not since the internet's early days have we had technology that is ready and is only limited by the human imagination. Most other tools we've been given since then and before then was very much, this is what it can do, have fun with it. But as we talked, like what you just mentioned, that's the beginning. Those were the simplest of things. Once we get over that, once that's taken care of, once our children grow up, use cases will appear that is just mind-blowing. So.
Well, that's it. I mean, this is a sub $200 phone. It's a Moto G. I like these a lot, and that's got 30 sensors or something
really
in it.
Call our procurement office. They can get a bit of.
Oh, this is my own one. I have a real life phone, but that's got 20 or 30 sensors in. It's got programmatic access to those sensors. Android, in this case, gives it that good framework. But all of those sensors, apparently if you go to the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas, I think it is each year, it's sort of a huge trade show full of people selling these tiny little widgets. You know, this one's a GPS, this one's a temperature sensor, this one's a accelerometer.
Yeah.
And they're cheap and they're quite easy to knit together and they come with their own little APIs. And if you can program, you know, they're probably, Android is basically Linux, isn't it, with a bit of structure to it. So it really is like, you know, this stuff 15 years ago, none of those, each of those components would have been an expensive piece of specialist equipment. And now, you know, if you can think of, if it moves, if it's got a temperature, if it's at a certain altitude, if it's in a particular location, you can get all that stuff so cheaply from a hardware point of view. So yeah, absolutely. Suddenly we're opening up, you know, everything that a phone can do. All that technology is cheaply available to people to manage and to build devices. I guess the only problem is because it's so easy, there's a lot of really bad devices with really bad security and really, really big risks. And companies have to be aware that a lot of the time these things turn up in the business without anyone planning it. I used to joke about a page with software asset managers who I talk to a lot. I used to talk about a page in the Oracle Software Investment Guide, which is basically this huge thing of complex rules about how you have to pay for Oracle. But it talked for years about a forklift. And if your forklift was talking to the database, then you had to have X number of licenses, which I always used to kind of think was a weird example. But then last year, Forbes wrote an article about the connected forklift. And these days, apparently, you buy a forklift and it comes with, I don't know, they listed about 15 different sensors, bits of technology, monitoring devices, radio beacons. So suddenly a lot of this stuff, good or bad, is already in the business.
Yeah.
And so how is it going to change our job? Well, firstly, it's going to make that forklift super productive. And, you know, it gives IT the opportunity to think of things. You know, maybe if that forklift starts to break, we can have somebody sent out to it before anyone has to notice it and call a technician. That's good.
Yeah. And again, use a 3D printer to create the part that they need right there on the spot.
Yeah, but then next time there's a horrible worm and people have, you know, because it's a forklift company, they maybe didn't, you know, I'm sure some of them are perfectly good, but a lot of companies building IoT devices aren't necessarily, they're focused on just getting stuff to market quickly. Security, access controls, you know, that kind of stuff can fall by the wayside very easily in that kind of market. And that's to companies, you know, we've seen some major hacks through connected devices. You know, one in the big retailer in America that was hacked through its air conditioning systems, for example, was a huge story. And
well, you shut off this air conditioning in a Saudi Arabian office, then you have an issue at hand. So different if you do it here. Well, 150 years ago, so we boiled water to measure what altitude we were at, and today we're worrying about technology is so smart that we can't control it. So we're moving in the right direction, at least. It was, as always, John, it was great talking to you. You're a pleasure to have in the zoo, and hopefully we can do this again.
One day you'll get me when I'm not off the back of a long haul flight as well, because every time
that's when you're the best, because the crazy stuff comes up. Thank you, John. Take care. The rest of you out there, take care. Be safe. Bye.